Today, we're diving into the work of one of philosophy's most provocative and, honestly, most misunderstood thinkers, Émile Cioran. You might know him as the philosopher of despair, but as we're about to see, his ideas about failure and suffering, well, they might just be some of the most liberating tools you'll ever find.
So let's just jump right into the deep end with a classic Cioran bombshell. Only optimists commit suicide. I mean, that statement just stops you in your tracks, right? It feels completely backward. It forces you to ask,
what in the world could he possibly mean by that? How could the most hopeful people, the optimists, be the ones most likely to commit the ultimate act of despair? To get to the bottom of this, we really have to unpack the unique way Cioran looked at, well, everything.
All right, Section 1, A Writer's Therapy. Here, we're going to take a closer look at that title he got stuck with, the philosopher of despair.
To get Cioran, you first have to know what he's famous for. And it's for tackling all these heavy, uncomfortable subjects. You know, dread, melancholy, decay, failure, suicide, the kind of stuff we're all taught to avoid in polite conversation. Looking at this list, you can totally see why he got that philosopher of despair label. But that label misses the entire point of what he was doing.
And this right here is the absolute key to understanding him. Cioran could not have cared less if you agreed with him. I mean, the guy famously rejected literary awards. He wasn't trying to build a following. His writing was a deeply, deeply personal kind of therapy. It was his way of dealing with his own chronic insomnia, his own dread, and the sheer absurdity of being alive.
He said it himself so brilliantly with this line. For him, the act of writing, of just getting a feeling out of your head and down onto the page, it instantly robs that feeling of its power over you. It makes it bearable. So for Cioran, writing wasn't about getting famous or building a philosophical system. It was literally a matter of life and death. It was how he survived. Okay, Section 2, The Beauty of Failure. Let's dig into why Cioran found success so predictable and kind of boring.
Let's frame this with a scene we can all picture. A high school reunion. So, on one side of the room, you've got the success story. The person who did everything right. You know the type. Followed the rules, became an accountant, their life path. It's pretty predictable. But then you have the failure. Their story is just chaotic, it's messy, it's totally unique, and let's be honest, it's a way more interesting story. So Cioran's question is simple. Who would you actually want to talk to at the party? The person whose life went exactly according to plan? Or the person who failed their way into this bizarre, one-of-a-kind existence? The failure's life is a unique work of art. The success story, as Cioran saw it, often feels like a copy of a copy.
You know, this connects so perfectly to that famous line from Tolstoy. Success often leads to conformity. Everyone's chasing the same finish line of security and stability. But failure? Oh, failure's where true originality is born. Think about it. There are infinite ways to fail, but only a few prescribed ways to succeed. That makes every failure a unique masterpiece of chaos.
Which brings us to Section 3, What Failure Reveals. Because for Cioran, it's more than just interesting. It's a gateway to really, truly knowing who you are.
But for Cioran, failure isn't just more compelling. It's absolutely essential. Let me give you an example. Imagine a guy who only ever plays basketball against a team of fourth graders. He wins every game, 183-0. He walks around boasting about his undefeated record, feeling like a huge success. But what has he actually learned about himself? About his real skills? Absolutely nothing. Success without a real challenge is meaningless. And this gets right to the heart of his argument. Failure gives you this raw, unfiltered look at yourself. It shows you exactly where your limits are, right here, right now. It basically smacks you in the face with reality. Success, on the other hand, well, it can puff up our egos and make us lose touch with that real, honest, inward self.
So here's the big takeaway from this section. Failure is the one companion in life that will always, always tell you the truth. You just can't hide from it. So instead of running from it like an enemy, Cioran says we should embrace it, maybe even treat it like a friend. A brutally honest friend who keeps us grounded.
All right, Section 4, the freedom of an idea. And here we need to tread carefully because we're going to reframe Cioran's most difficult concept,
Suicide. Now, this is probably his most challenging concept, so it's critical we understand the distinction he's making. He is not talking about the act of suicide. He is talking about the philosophical idea of suicide. For him, this idea wasn't a dark temptation pulling him down. It was a source of incredible comfort. It was the knowledge that there was always an exit door. And that very knowledge is what gave him the strength to endure, because it meant he was never, ever truly a prisoner of his own life.
And it's so important to see that he actually argued against the act itself. He saw it as a kind of logical mistake. First, he'd say, you always do it too late. The suffering you're trying to escape has already happened. And second, and this brings us right back to our opening quote, he believed he was an act born from disappointed optimism. It comes from the shattered hope that life was supposed to be happy and free of suffering.
And this all leads to that central paradox, one of his most stunning and unforgettable statements. Just let that sink in. The act of suicide is an error, but the idea of it, for him, was a lifeline. It's a mental tool that, paradoxically, makes life livable. Ultimately, this is the freedom that Cioran is talking about. It's the ultimate safety net for the mind. If you know deep down that you are never truly trapped, you suddenly find the strength to face anything, to endure any amount of absurdity, because the choice to stay is always 100% your own.
And that brings us to our final section, living with absurdity. This is where we tie it all together and find the true lesson in Cioran's work.
So what do we do with all this? How can these seemingly dark and pessimistic ideas actually become powerful tools for living? Well, it really boils down to this toolkit that Cioran gives us. It's not about being negative. It's about being radically honest. It's about having the courage to look at the uncomfortable parts of life, to see failure not as an end but as a fascinating teacher, and to use the entire spectrum of human experience as a source of strength.
This final quote, for me, just sums up his entire philosophy perfectly. Cioran didn't just want to tolerate failure. He wanted his entire life to be transfigured by it, to be transformed, elevated, and made more beautiful by it. For him, failure wasn't a source of shame. It was the very thing that could make an existence profound.
And that leaves us with one last question for you to think about. If we follow Cioran's logic, then our failures aren't embarrassing secrets to be hidden away. They're our most unique, our most powerful, and our most interesting stories. So the question to leave you with is this: which of your failures is just waiting to transform you? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.